Day 1, 20 February. Today I caught the 6:46 train from London's King Cross station for Ireland. It was early, I know. I changed trains at Crewe in Chester, and then arrived at Holyhead, Wales. I then caught the Irish ferry ship to Dublin. I arrived in Dublin around 14:30. After a short shuttle bus from the Dublin port, I arrived in central Dublin. From there, the first thing I did was use my visa to obtain some euro. I then caught a taxi straight to the Guinness factory. I stayed for a couple of hours at the Guinness factory. I would have to say that it was the best highlight of Dublin. The factory was interesting for me, having brewed my own beer and noticing that Guinness has an extra ingredient, nitrogen. Really enjoyed the top floor bar with views over the city, and I was lucky enough while I was there because some of the locals celebrated their birthdays and there was Irish dancing. I got this on video, classic.
It's not over yet, by the way. The party's not over.
From the factory I caught a taxi to Dublin Castle. I liked the colours, but it was a little overrated. It doesn't really compare to London Tower or Edinburgh Castle. From there I headed to the Temple Bar and I had another drink of Guinness. It was a very nice bar. I asked the age and they said it was in service from the 1840s. A little bit of a tourist trap though, as Guinness costs twice as much here. Nevertheless, second best highlight in Dublin. I then wandered past the Halfpenny Bridge and down Grafton Street, the main shopping street of Dublin. I then walked through St. Stephen's Green, another tourist trap because you literally couldn't get out of it. I even laughed about it, and in Australia we don't lock entrances to our parks. From there I walked around Merrion Square and took some nice pictures of some doors, very original. I then proceeded north to Trinity College and walked into the campus, very big. Unfortunately, I couldn't go see the Book of Kells as it was too late in the afternoon. Oh well, maybe next time. I then walked up O'Connell Street and saw the famous spire. Another Guinness, this time while eating dinner. I stopped in at a local pub for Irish stew, a wonderful dish. I then quickly dashed to the train station and caught the 1900 train to Belfast. I arrived in Belfast at around 21:30. I didn't have any accommodation for this leg of my trip, so it ended up being an interesting night, especially when I only had 2.5 hours sleep the night before. That night I went from hotel to hotel and they were all booked. Don't worry, there isn't a sad ending to this story. I ended up obtaining cheap accommodation at a bed and breakfast a little bit out of town, Helga Lodge. Finally I got to go to sleep after a pretty full-on day. Day 2, 21 February. Today I woke up and walked to the Giant's Causeway Tour departure point, a backpacker's hostel. Perhaps I should have stayed there last night. I now appreciate such places a little more after they are only one of the places where you can wash your clothes. They always have washing machines, dryers, and they're good for when you stay in a place for a short while. Hotels require at least a day to get your clothes back to you. I arrived here early and had a wonderful cappuccino. The tour was delayed, waiting for numbers. This was alright, I got to talk to the people on the tour. Many of these people were Canadians studying at Belfast University. I don't know why, but the UK attracts a lot of Canadians, while Europe appears to attract more Australians. Finally, we departed at 10:45 and headed north and saw David and Goliath, the Titanic cranes in the distance. That was quite special.
Now, the last time those big cranes were used to build the world's longest and largest ship was from 1974 until 1979, and the ship was over 3/4 of a mile long, and it was a big oil tanker. And see,
the further we headed north, the greener and more scenic everything became. We arrived at the North Atrium coast. The first attraction we saw was the Carrick Aceed rope bridge. It was closed, but it was still nice to view. The next attractions were Dunluce Castle and Hangman Hill. Hangman Hill apparently started the What Do You Do with a Drunken Sailor song. As the tour guide explained, you hang a drunken sailor early in the morning. This is because he has just stolen a bottle of Bushmills whiskey from down the road. We then visited the Bushmills distillery. I bought some small bottles of the many varieties of Bushmills whiskey and some whiskey truffles. Delicious. The last attraction was the Giant's Causeway. This was something special. I firstly walked along the top of the cliffs to where you could stand in the middle of a little outcrop off the cliff. It must have been the windiest place I've ever visited because you started to really fear for your life. You had thoughts that you may be blown off the cliff. It was an experience to remember. I then proceeded back to the stairs leading down to the Giant's Causeway. I saw the Giant's Organ and other cool rock formations. I then stood at the end of a path looking out to the sea. This was fascinating as while I was standing there, I was being covered with foam. The sea was crashing with such fury into the rocks that foam was blowing up like snow. That was surreal. I then walked down the hill to the Giant's Causeway, the hexagonal rocks. It was very interesting and presented an opportunity for some cool pictures. I had expected the causeway to be larger because of the tourist pictures, but it still impressed me. A long walk up the hill, a visit to the gift shop, where I bought a Finn McCool compass. Maybe I should have bought one earlier in my trip for the times I got lost. And then I was back on the wind-resistant bus to Belfast. The day was not over for me yet. When I got back at 1600, I did some sightseeing of Belfast. I went and saw the following sights: City Hall, the Courts, St George's Market, the Queen's Bridge on the River Lagan, very nice, the Clock Tower, St Anne's Cathedral, also very nice, Castle Court, Donegal Place, Grand Opera Place, Europa Hotel, and the Crown Liquor Saloon. The Crown Liquor Saloon was probably the highlight of Belfast for me. I sampled some of the local beer, including a Belfast ale and a Hart beer. Good beer, although a little different to Australian beer. It has a sweet kick to it. I then went upstairs and had some dinner. Steak and Guinness pie, very enjoyable. I recommend dinner at this place. I then went back to the bed and breakfast to regroup. After lightening my bag, I left again for town. It was nice walking the streets at night. The new Victoria Square was all lit up, and so was the Belfast Wheel. I decided to do the touristy thing and went on the Belfast Wheel. I think it cost £6, considerably cheap. I'll tell you what, and I'm not embarrassed to say it, it was scary. I went up in a carriage by myself, and when you cleared the building line, the whole carriage started to rock back and forward. And then when you went down, it didn't stop, but went up again to give you more punishment. I think I'll enjoy the experience more now after living through it.
Looking along the same side of Donegal Square is a magnificent red sandstone building, now part of the Marks and Spencer.
I then proceeded to another pub hoping to catch a local Irish band. Unfortunately, they weren't playing until later in the night, so I proceeded back to the bed and breakfast accommodation. Sleep, yes. Day 3, 22 February. I woke up around 4:30. I packed my bags, skipped breakfast, and caught a taxi for the 0600 Stena Line ferry to Stanria, Scotland. This was the end of my Irish experience. It was unfortunate that it was short, but it was well worth it. I would have to say that my best experience in Ireland was the people.